Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Trade the Chain. Thank you for joining us. Happy Friday. I am so freaking happy it's Friday. It's been a busy work week, guys, and the market and everything else. August 6th, that's what day it is for those of you who can't keep track of it. Joined by our regular celebrities, CJ and Monty, crypto analysts over at marketrebellion.com. Ryan is having a bad hair day, so he will not be joining us for this episode. But that being said, I'm feeling really bullish. I really am. I mean, the markets today, I'm more excited about the markets today than I have been in months, guys. It's almost been dragging ourselves to the cameras to talk about the markets for a little bit now. And now I feel like it's back in May or March or April, or pick any of those months. I don't care. What about you guys?
I agree with that, Alex. I echo your sentiment. The order book is on Binance is kind of looking a lot like Monty's background right now. A little bit of resistance, but a whole lot of buy orders down around 40 and 39. So, oh man, I guess we're already above 43 now. I didn't even notice that while we were streaming. But
look at that.
Yeah, I mean, these are levels we haven't been at in months, Alex. So there's a reason why you're feeling this way for the first time in months. I mean, 42K, very critical level. We're above it now. So let's hope we can remain there.
Yeah, listen, I'm just going to sneak a peek. First of all, I wanted to devote a lot of the show today to the markets. And I know that CJ wants to break into the traditional side as well. But, look at that. Look at that beautiful spike right there. Price. It's glorious. I mean, it's like artwork. Look at that. Oh, I could just play with the charts all day. I'm sorry, guys. Let's get down to business. CJ, lead it off, my man. Oh, did we do the disclaimer yet?
I've got it shared, but I'll say it. Nothing said today on behalf of Market Rebellion or Trade the Chain should be considered financial advice. This is for educational and informative purposes only, guys. We want to teach. We want to give our own perspectives on the market. That doesn't necessarily mean you follow us, but we want you to do your own research and make your own decisions in that regard. But without further ado, like Alex had previously mentioned, let's get into the charts because I definitely want to take a look at Bitcoin, Ethereum, the traditional markets, as well as some altcoins as well, because a little bit earlier in the week, we were talking about a turning point in Bitcoin and in the market in general. And this is not necessarily a game of intellect. This is a game of kind of emotional intelligence and knowing yourself and being able to see in a market when the trend is changing and be able to have conviction to act on that trend change. And the significant change in trend for us, at least for me, was when we made these lows, had that bullish engulfing candle, and then climbed above the moving average. Now that we're above the moving average and we're actually using it as very ideal support, I think we're well on our way into the new uptrend, especially after the critical test just a few days ago. I was getting a little nervous when we were testing that Fibonacci level, but due to the fact that it's held now and we've actually made a higher high on the chart, it's looking very bullish. And, I do think traders will likely take a little bit of profit, because we're running up against a critical Fibonacci level being the 3.8 level. Nonetheless, we might get a little bit of rejection from that level, but I do expect a continuation if we truly are to follow this type of schematic. I mean, this has ended up being very accurate for us, and we're still on that last kind of tail end before a spring further up into the 40s and potentially 50s in the next couple of weeks of August and into September. Also, one thing that I did want to highlight is just kind of the sell order books and kind of where we're starting to see sell walls stack up. We saw one at 42K earlier today, and it took a couple of attempts on the hourly to get flush and through that level. But now that we've done it, we're seeing a lot of traders lining up at around 43,500 that are looking to take profit at that level and 45K. But really, beyond that, the order book on the sell side really thins out up into the upper 40s and 50s. And, when we look at volume and support and resistance, there's really not a whole lot after, 43.5 and 45K. So things could get very explosive here. But back to kind of our regular schedule, I wanted to go through the S&P and the major indices because I know we had kind of discussed concern over the stock markets and, how I had kind of turned like bullish, and I still am feeling that way. I think if we look at some of the major indices, like the S&P, for instance, let me go ahead and add like the MACD or some momentum indicators. But we are still hanging very strong and have made all-time highs these last 2 days. Until we really break this critical level, which would be about 4,200, maybe 4,300 now in this case, I don't think there's any cause for concern, with the traditional markets. I think for the next 6 to potentially 12 months, with the amount of liquidity we actually have in the system, that we're not going to experience any type of catastrophic, downfall. I see our economy being in a very similar place as 2010, after a massive couple of years of like exponential stimulus. Also, when we look at the Dow, very similar states. NASDAQ is coming off just a little bit today, but it had a massive all-time high yesterday, as you can see. And then the one that I think the most people are afraid of is the IWM, being the Russell 2000, because its trend has shifted a little bit, as you can see. It's more of a sideways consolidation as opposed to, a really strong bull trend, which is what we saw earlier in the year. But I think there's a pretty valid argument to be made on the Russell and having 2,000 companies, especially with those being smaller companies relative to tech and FANG stocks that have really been leading the S&P and, those larger cap assets. So I think there is, an argument to be made about why the Russell can consolidate, but then can still be further bullish. And we are seeing that. It's now back above its critical moving average, being that 20 SMMA, the smooth moving average. And, we're creating consistent higher highs and higher lows here on the daily chart. And as a result, let me show you this channel I have drawn. So on the 4 hour, it looks like we're starting to enter into a potential uptrending channel here on the IWM. So we'll see. Also, look at that bullish crossover in the MACD and that continuation ever since we hit our low, which was coincidentally a TD buy 9. So a lot of really nice technicals lining up here. And, bullish formation looks to be here with us for the foreseeable future. Now shifting to the crypto market, let's, I guess we already did recap Bitcoin. Before we get into any of the alts, I want to let you guys say and, share some of your thoughts. Anything,
Yeah, that was really good stuff, CJ. I did just have one thing to add. We've been talking a lot about that macro higher low and what that might look like in terms of price action and what that means for the market. Obviously, very critical that we put that in. And one thing that, you, CJ, talked a lot about earlier in the year was the CMF, check and money flow, and taking a look at that. And I think it's very encouraging that we're seeing a positive divergence here in the CMF. It implies that new money is flowing in. And, like Alex said, we haven't felt like this in months, and that's because we haven't really reached this level in months. We haven't seen a positive, really, divergence in the CMF since all the way back in September of 2020. This was when we were trending very strong. Institutional interest was flowing into the space. And as you can see, it actually peaked here at right around the levels we're at now at about 42K. This is when we had the most amount of new money flowing into the space. And from this point on, it was more or less a negative divergence all the way down here to the bottom, where we got the massive capitulation to 29.8K or so. But I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing today. We got that macro higher low put in that was supported by the money flow, which turned down, but immediately turned back up as price turned back up. More money's flowing into the space, and I'm very encouraged by that. And it really does feel like it felt back here at the end of 2020 because we're getting more institutional interest. There's been a bunch of headlines in just the last 2 weeks alone talking about, family offices, big institutional clients, opening up, avenues for investment for, wealthier clients. I think that's very encouraging, and it's being reflected in the price action and as well as the CMF. So, like I said, I'm just very encouraged by what I'm seeing here in terms of the technicals.
I'm so glad you brought up the CMF because I totally forgot about that and I wanted to talk about it. And it is one of the most subtle yet important metrics to understanding like the momentum and future rocket fuel that the space potentially has. And when you start seeing a divergence, specifically a negative divergence where price continues to go up, yet the CMF decreases and creates, lower highs, that's a huge warning signal that says, sure, we could be going up for the interim, but the overall rally and strength of the trend is slowing down and might change relatively soon. So should we hit the alts or anything you'd like to cover, Alex?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of, take a look at the elephant in the room. And this is where I'm going to be the pessimist. And that's the infrastructure bill that's currently, in front of Congress and the White House is going over. I can't keep track. I feel like it's so difficult to keep track of the amendments that they keep doing to it on an hourly basis, it feels like. I know that in the beginning, the proposal had very strict ramifications for Bitcoin miners and such. I know that it had strict ramifications for centralized exchanges in the U.S. and various other trading counterparties for reporting, which led to even worse off tax implications. But any idea, guys, what the latest is on any of this? And do we see this as maybe a black swan event possibility for the bull run leg going into fall?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways you can look at this, Alex, and I think that's reflected in just the comments section alone here. There's some people that are looking at it as a positive event, and then others that are looking at it as sort of a potential negative black swan event. But I think that, right now we're already seeing the sort of positive implications of, it all depends on how they amend it, right? Like you said, the language is too broad defining a brokerage. It needs to definitely be narrowed to exclude decentralized exchanges and miners. They should not be included in that same category. They are completely different animals and should be treated as such. But right now, the language is just broad. So as long as that's properly amended, I think everything will be okay. And what's more important is something, that Ryan mentioned earlier in the week, is that this sort of legitimacy and, mainstream attention into Bitcoin is very important for the institutional confidence. And institutional confidence always precedes retail confidence, which is what leads to those parabolic uptrends. And I think we're, like I just talked about, we're already seeing institutions more willing to step in. I think, just because of the, amount of talk that there's been with SEC Chairman Gary Gensler talking about it, and with all the talk about it in DC, Bitcoin's more on the public conscious than ever. And in many ways, I think that's a good thing. So we have to wait and see how exactly the amendment turns out. I do expect the language to be more narrowed to only include, the brokerages that should be included and not decentralized exchanges and miners.
Now, one of the hard things to deal with, though, I get what you're saying, but we printed a lot of money over the last year and a half, and this bill is really it's both to support and spend more money where it's needed, but it's also being frameworked as well for basic government repatriation of money, and that's where the crypto stuff is coming in. I think somewhere last figures I looked at were good for about $32 billion in the short run and stuff like that. I mean, how much do you expect them to reasonably parse back before they say, listen, we cannot not take any money. We have trillions of dollars on the street that we've printed. So I don't know. It'll be. I'm finding it more of a worry in the short term right now, I guess, as a catalyst event for crypto than I do in the overpricing of the traditional market. my two thoughts. But all right, let's head into alts. CJ, why don't you lead it off? But before you do, let me just take a look at what's trending for the daily here. Wow. Okay, you got some pretty good daily sentiment. I mean, that's up across the board. I think sentiment should be a consumer confidence index, Monty. Um, this will be like tweeting will be like the housing market, confidence level for the traditional markets. But overall, looking very bullish right now. Really happy about that. And just so you know, CJ Landon just wrote in the comments he's
I saw that.
He's in his electric vehicle driving up to Watkins Glen. He'll get there maybe the day after tomorrow. Who knows?
All right, let's hit ETH then, I suppose.
ETH has had a breakout. And do you see the burn rate that's going on right now with the deflationary mechanism they incorporated with the London fork?
Yeah.
It's 100,000 an hour.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking, Monty and I, about supply and demand and kind of its overall characteristics and dictation on the market. And we've just had a very broad decrease in supply, whether it be Bitcoin and Ethereum. You can see this on chain. You can see this with Bitcoin's leaving spot exchanges. But what that does is when there's less spot, volume, or I guess less spot Bitcoins that are liquid on exchanges, it doesn't take a whole lot of demand to really push the price up when supply is very thin and limited. And you can really see that money coming into the space, like Monty had been saying, on the CMF. Like right here, we have two really nice trending levels here with clear money coming into the space and momentum, Like, let me give you an example of what you don't want to see in the CMF when we're trending. Like what you don't want to see when we're making new highs is when we're making lower highs in the CMF, because it means we're not moving up with the momentum that we previously were. And so therefore a correction in trend or a reversal is probably likely. But that's not what we're seeing this time around. Like Monty had correctly pointed out, we're still trending upward in momentum, in volume. And that's a very promising sign. That's exactly what I want to see from a bullish perspective. Just to touch on some alts, there's a lot of these like ascending triangles that are occurring. Another thing about the CMF, and this goes for things like the RSI as well, and just oscillators in general, is that when we talk about things like ascending triangles or support and resistance or parallel channels or things like that, those concepts are also applicable to like oscillators like the MACD, the RSI, and of course the CMF. And so the closer we get to these apexes in both of these triangles, ultimately the higher probability that we break to the upside. And so I really like this chart and this momentum of what we're seeing as a result of that. But she is not the only one. Let's take a look at some of these. Lena's been one we've been following. Took a look at a lot of assets this morning as well. Aave, another one of those. Just consistent uptrends in the CMF, looking very good. This is another instance of that ascending triangle that is really broken out nicely to the upside. So, could we see some profit taking at this Fibonacci level and come down a little bit? Sure. Absolutely that is possible. I just think that the momentum in the market right now, and based on some schematics that have really ended up being applicable to this market, I see everything still being very broadly bullish throughout the collective market.
Yeah, and from a more like fundamental perspective on ETH, I heard Vitalik talking about this the other day, but think about how promising that is for a massive network like Ethereum to be able to implement a huge switch from proof of work to proof of stake in the middle of its existence, and it went off more or less seamlessly. I mean, this is obviously something that's been in development for years, since 2014 more or less, but the fact that they're able to do that while there's this much capital at stake, it went more or less seamlessly and now is running smoothly. The market's responding well. I think that's very encouraging and speaks to the flexibility of ETH, as a whole. I think you're muted, Alex.
Sorry, thank you. I was no, for the first time in a long time, I felt bullish about ETH, and usually it's Ryan that I have to tap into for that special power. But the thing is that what ETH didn't solve from a fee advantage standpoint, it's solved by changing the way it works, and I think that is going to be huge in the long run. So I'm really kind of I'm happily surprised. So all my negative market share comments or doubts, I'm kind of tabling them for now.
Interesting.
So I think I was getting a little echo there for a minute. Sorry. But I see that in the comments we have some thoughts about BitTorrent. I just wanted to talk one last thing about kind of momentum and, specifically the indicators that you can look at to try to identify when the trend has clearly changed. And, it takes courage and conviction to be able to kind of look at these things and see them in real time. But this is a lot of kind of the signals that we saw in a trade insight a few weeks ago when we were pretty bullish on Bitcoin. Look at the start of the bull rally and what we saw in October. We broke out from that smooth moving average, saw a lot of volume, and immediately, followed up that way. This is the first time, a couple weeks ago in which we broke above the moving average for the first time since October. That's a great sign, being above that resistance. Bullish spike in volume, continued positive divergence in the MACD, right? We have price going down through a negative consolidation, yet the MACD is still turning up. That shows you that, positive momentum, negative momentum is declining. Technical ratings indicator flipped to positive for one of the first times in quite a while. And then, of course, one of my favorites on the bottom here, the DMI indicator, also flipped to positive momentum when we saw that just a couple of weeks ago. So I truly believe this event in time and this chart is going to be very interesting to look back on, during December or January of next year, to look, was this actually a turning point, if we hold and continue to now trend toward 100K. So those are kind of the areas of like where the trend really changes. And you can see these elements in BitTorrent too. You can see them in a lot of cryptocurrencies. We're back above that moving average. We have a lot of volume coming into the market. And just like Monty had pointed out previously, like we have these massive positive divergences in the CMF. So we have investors willing to put up large amounts of capital and accumulate even when price is not necessarily moving that much. But what this means in the overall takeaway is that these rallies are much more authentic now that they're paired with strength coming from the CMF as well. But I already rambled for a little too long. I'll pass it back to you, gentlemen.
No worries. Monty, you big BTT fan?
Yeah, no, I'm a fan. Bram Cohen definitely would. I think he's a very intelligent guy. We talk about investing in people. Rob talks about that all the time too. And yeah, that was part of the reason why I was confident to buy Chia as well. Beyond the technicals, they have a strong team. But we have a question in chat from Bill Parker about Ocean Protocol, and I think that kind of ties in with what CJ was just talking about. In terms of the volume profile of a lot of these alts. And actually, I picked it as my Doge of the day this morning on the Daily Crypto Bite. And the reason I did that is because on the Trade the Chain dashboard, this was the 6th highest in terms of relative trading volume, like right below VGX. So this thing's seeing an incredible amount of trading volume, as it's reflected down here, And CJ was talking about the CMF. I think that looking at charts like this and looking at Ocean is just a great example of kind of how the market has played out over the last few months. We had declining bearish volume all through the last 2 months. And we kind of got this max capitulation period here where trading volume was so low and there really wasn't anything going on. We have a significant negative divergence from the 200 period SMA, but now we're starting to tick up. We're getting an increase in volume. Relative trading volume is, up significantly via Trade the Chain's dashboard. And you can just kind of see that we're starting to tick up in terms of volume. we're back above the smooth moving average, like a lot of those other assets that CJ talked about. And I think that looking at the increased volume, the strong divergence from the moving average are just encouraging factors that leads me to believe that Ocean is an asset that could make a move up to this moving average and come in parity with the rest of the market relatively quickly. So that's why I picked it today. There's a lot of assets that are getting above this moving average on strong volume, and I think they're all worth a good look.
Alrighty, well, let's move on to our next positive piece of news in the market, and that is going to be, really this. If you can turn Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan's, mind somewhat around on Bitcoin, I feel like you can do it to anybody. And one of the things that happened was, obviously everybody remembers JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon stating back in 2017 how if anybody who deals with cryptocurrency at JP Morgan is going to be fired. That's it. It's toxic. It's done. Now, they quietly have let 6 crypto funds be offered to their clients. I mean, to me, this is bullish. To me, this means that the sentiment around JP Morgan is more than Jamie Dimon's sway. It means to me that it's more about business than it is about what his personal opinion is on Bitcoin. So I think this is tremendous. And one of the things that I also think is positive coming out of this article is not only the fact that they're now allowing their clients to have access to these 6 crypto funds, but these 6 crypto funds happen to be publicly traded in the fashion that they are. So that lets me think that if you have bulge bracket banks like JP Morgan now allowing for publicly traded, now it's OTC, but it's still publicly traded funds, that we're getting closer and closer to an ETF. Not that an ETF is going to have an impact on the market now, like possibly say when it was first floated around years ago on the Bitcoin market, but still, it to me, it feels like regulators are now having more insight because of these guys, and they're going to speak in their ears, and regulation framework is not going to be a blanket throw on the industry in the US, but more like a customized solution for each sector of crypto. I don't know. It's just my opinion. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Ryan retweeted something from CZ this morning, and it kind of reminds me of that. It seems like the regulation is more reactive than proactive, and I think that's okay. I think that's a good thing. But in terms of JP Morgan switching from a skeptic to a believer, I think you're 100% right, Alex. It just speaks to, the tremendous amount of interest in the space and the fact that, if they want to remain competitive in finance, this is a sector that they inevitably need to step into. So, this is good news in the sense that I think that there's going to be more and more institutional on-ramps coming in, the next 6 months. And about the ETF, I agree that we just need more regulational clarity. I think eventually it will come. What effect it will have on the market, I still think it would be a profound effect on the market if we did have a tradable ETF for Bitcoin. But I still think that's a ways away. But yeah, you're right, Alex. This is a step in the right direction for sure.
CJ, non-trading thoughts? I know you're in the trading mentality right now. I know that Chia got a new listing on KuCoin. You're excited about that. But what are your thoughts on just, say, the broader macro environment with news like this?
We get news like this, it seems like, every few weeks. I can remember when Soros's family office entered into crypto a couple weeks ago. Just recently, we had 0.72 of Steve Cohen's, $1 billion fund. And the institutional interest for crypto is that it's the fastest growing financial industry. Everybody wants a piece of it in traditional finance. And those rails continue to get built. And I see them being built in exchanges like firsthand. And so even if we do have regulation and we have, governments kind of being reactive, I still believe there's so much institutional money on that is still going to come into the market especially with a vehicle through like an ETF, which could be very soon around the corner. But when you get players that continuously come into the space like that, it really bodes well for the industry collectively. And I've said it many times, but in the last week or so, like I am still very bullish for the next 6 to 12 months on the equity market. Probably just a little bit less for the crypto market. I think we're definitely going to go over six figures. If not by the end of the year, then soon after the end of the year, and then we'll probably experience another 80% correction like we have before. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we finish up the episode with with BTC and ETH predictions for end of year? Have they changed? Where do you guys stand?
So I kind of forgot, but I wanted to say this, is that anything that I say today about the markets is not applicable to tomorrow. Like traders have the right to change their minds every single day when new data and information is presented to them.
DJ, we do this question every month.
Yeah, but if you cannot change your viewpoint from a day-to-day basis, like you have to have that flexibility both as a trader and investor, and you can't get caught with your ego and being right. And so flexibility is absolutely key. I'm sorry, I just saw comments that said these guys thought we were going to 20K. Traders make me laugh.
I saw that too. You're absolutely right. Flexibility, and that's the way it is. Listen, everybody in the comments has flexibility too. They think one thing the other day, new information emerges, and it's a different opinion the next. It's just the way it is. All right, so Monty, I'm going to put you on the fire first. Bitcoin end of year price as of today, with all the information you have today, and Ethereum.
Yeah, no, I still believe in the macro model of, a retest of 100, or not a retest, but a test of 100K, and, perhaps some cooling down around 70 to 75K. I think that's realistic looking at the current price action. We put in that macro higher low. We got, the CMF ticking up. And I think the key is going to be, more institutional capital. That was the key at the end of 2020. I think it's going to be, the key to the end of this year. And as for ETH, like I said earlier, I'm very encouraged by the developments of ETH 2.0. And I think that, if we do get that Bitcoin test of 100K, it's going to raise all ships like it always does. But I think that ETH could even run proportionally more than Bitcoin. And I think that, a possible test of 8 to 10K is not out of the realm of possibility for ETH.
CJ, over to you, sir, with the information you have today.
Yeah, it looks like we're starting a new uptrend. I could definitely see us grinding around 40 into the 50s, even as deep into like October or even as late as November. And then towards the end of the year, typically at the tail end of these bull cycles, you'll see Bitcoin do something like 100% in a month. And, if we grind to say 50 or 60K by October, November, and then all the mania comes back into the market and pushes Bitcoin up, 100%, then that would put us over the target of 100K for the end of the year, which I think is definitely still feasible at our current point. You look at when Bitcoin initially went from when Bitcoin initially went from 20K to 40K, I think it did about roughly 115% in 27 days. And so I still think that's very possible. I'm a little more unsure on ETH. I know a lot of people have said anywhere kind of in the range from 7,500 to 10,000, but it kind of just depends on how volatile that tail end becomes and how long we go on before the music stops. But that's my opinion as of today.
Okay, that's very realistic and reasonable. I applaud your opinions there. So I'm just so excited today. I just woke up today and I was super excited, looking at the markets all day, doing work, super excited. I'm happy it's Friday. Thank you guys all for watching. Don't forget to check out marketrebellion.com /crypto. If you are a member, don't forget virtual happy hour tonight, right guys? Still on for Friday, virtual happy hour. Check it out. Also, don't forget to head over to tradethechain.com and we will see, unless there's something drastic in the market and CJ calls me in a panic. We will see you on Monday. Hang on to your handlebars, folks, and have a great weekend.